Hey guys, Mr. Savage here. Sorry I've missed you for a while. It's been really strange being out this long. I kind of miss being in school, surprisingly enough. I bet you do too at this point. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Boston Massacre, something we've been kind of leading up to with all these different taxations, and now it's kind of really jump in. So on Classroom you have these questions on here. I hope you can follow along as I go. If I do go too fast, please stop it. Please stop this video, just so you can kind of catch up. I'll give you a heads up when you should be writing down the questions, and I'll try to give you a heads up too when I think you should probably stop the video as well. So, what we're going to be taking a look at is how in the Boston Massacre there are two sides to this story. You probably heard about the story of the Boston Massacre before, where the sad colonists were being slaughtered in droves. And in reality, there's a much different story to it. So we're going to take a look at two different headlines from a certain news story. What I want you to do is, and I want you to think about how this headline makes you feel, or how you react to this headline itself. So here's your first headline. This is number one. If you need to stop it really quick to check us out, that'd probably be a good idea. Based off this headline, police officers attack protesters. How do you think this story played out? Do you think the protester is the bad guy? Do you think the police officer is the bad guy? Who exactly is the one that is innocent, per se? Again, if you need to take a second to pause it, that's fine. Here's the second question as well. Same picture, different headline. Now it's protests become violent. Police must arrest several protesters. Now the story is a little different, right? It goes from the police officers being the bad guys to the police officers doing their jobs because the protesters have become violent. And this is the question for number two. I kind of gave you the answer. That's okay. It's the idea that, depends on how you're looking at it, the story changes very quickly, even though it's the same picture. Going on to number three and four. So, Governor Christie signs controversial bill. Now, based upon this picture of Governor Christie, which isn't a very flattering one, what do you think Governor Christie is doing with this controversial bill? And if you don't know, controversial means some people like it, some people hate it. So, based upon this headline with this picture of Governor Christie, who's looking a little disheveled. He looks like he's in the middle of saying something, so he's got like an unfortunate look on his face. He looks a little tired, maybe you can even argue. What do you think is this bill about, and how do you judge Governor Christie? And then, same headline, different picture, Governor Christie signs controversial bill. Same thing, but different picture. Now how do you look at it? He looks a little bit more composed. He looks a little bit more put together. I mean, just looking back and forth between the two of them, you have the first one and the second one. You could easily argue there's a different story there. And it's unfair how we, unfortunately, as humans, judge off the person and not the story itself. Now, we don't know the story. There might not even be a story. But you're just judging off what you see right here. So hopefully, as of now, you have 1, 2, and 3. Hopefully you've stopped it. If you need to go back, feel free to go back. So, back to 1760s. What we know right now, what we've talked about already, is that due to all of these taxes that we've talked about, these different acts, the tension is rising in Boston in particular. And the Redcoats, which are nicknamed for the British soldiers, were sent into Boston to quell these vicious uprisings, I guess is a good way to put it. There's fights, different riots, there's deaths caused by tension between the Bostonians and the Redcoats. One story in particular, on June 22nd, 1770, a young boy was killed when a British sympathizer, which is someone who's on the British side, fired into an angry crowd and killed the boy. And slowly but surely, there is a lot of different anger and hostility between the two sides sparking up in Boston at this point. Looking at Boston right now, by the way, Boston has changed greatly in the past 250 years. Boston on the right, as you can see, it's pretty much a peninsula. There is one small area to get into town. Obviously, there are docks surrounding the entirety of the city, but there's one area to get into town, unlike today where Boston's actually been built from like the ground up. There was no ground at one point. You can see this is the same thing right here and right here. So Boston's a much different city, and due to like the confines of this almost island, things can get a little bit more hostile because things are a little bit more close quarters. So, going forward, the events of this day leading up to the Boston Massacre. Initially, there was a British sentry, which we're just going to call a sentinel, standing out in front of the Boston Customs House. The Customs House is the place where they keep all the tax money, so they have to defend it. They can't leave. With this British sentry were a small group of boys. They began to torment him. They were throwing rocks at him, snowballs of ice, some pieces of wood, coal, things of that nature. And eventually this sentinel struck the boy, or one of the boys, with the butt of his musket, which is like the part that you put against your shoulder when you're holding it. So he kind of hit the boy with his musket. The boys obviously were not very happy about it, and they went into the bar, which was right next door to the customs house. They came out of the bar, and they had about 50 or 60 people surrounding this man. The British captain, Captain Thomas Preston, which his name will go down in infamy for a bunch of different reasons, sees what's happening outside. He rushes out of the customs house with 7 other soldiers, so there's now 9 British soldiers there, in order to protect the sentry. At this point, Preston is standing between the British and the colonists, and he's kind of putting his hands up, telling everyone, like, calm down, go home, we're not trying to have trouble tonight. By this point, though, unfortunately, the crowd's getting bigger, and Preston and his men are being surrounded on all sides. And they are starting to be attacked in multiple different ways. Not necessarily like just having things thrown at them, but actually being attacked as in people striking at them. And here is what we've seen many, many times. This should be a very familiar picture for you. This is the picture of the Boston Massacre, produced by a man named Paul Revere. You can see it at the bottom right corner. It's an engraving, which means that he actually etched it onto a piece of silver. And it's very famous for like something you've probably seen before. I want you to pause it here. I really actually want you to pause it here. I want you to stop watching for a moment. I want you to take just a minute to write down at least 8 or 9 things you see in this picture. I'm talking about things from what's going on in the sky to what are these individuals doing, to the looks on their faces, to even why is this dog here? These are questions that I really want you to take a look at. It's 8 or 9 things. You should be counting the British redcoats as well. Remember, I told you there were 9 British redcoats. Out of this, there's something interesting happening. So pause it now if you haven't. I'll give you a second. All right, so from this picture itself, there's a couple things to look at. First, very, very clear. The British are red, the colonists are blue. That's Paul Revere just making things nice and simple. Clearly, the colonists were not in a blue uniform. It just makes it a little bit easier for us to see. But in this picture, you can see a couple things happening. The colonists are in just disarray. You see this one man right here. He is putting his hand up, telling him, stop, stop, don't shoot. You see these other 2 men right here carrying away this guy who appeared to be injured. You can see blood streaming down right there. There are 2 men laying on the ground. There's one man in the back that's kind of like upside down. There is just chaos on this one side. There's also a dog in the middle. And I know you're probably wondering, okay, why is this dog here? Well, Paul Revere, in a sense, put it there to make it seem like these colonists were just out for a midnight stroll with their dog, just walking their dog like a good owner, and all of a sudden they were shot in the middle of the street. And he's trying to gain sympathy for the colonists. He's kind of saying like, oh, look at this poor dog's owner's dead, don't you feel bad for the colonists now? On the right, I hope you looked at their faces. You can kind of see that right here too, this one on the right here, he is almost smiling. I wouldn't say smiling, but he's kind of like grinning, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't look like he's like unhappy about it. Now Captain Preston, he's right here. You could tell this is Captain Preston because he has a sword. The officers at this time would not have a gun themselves. They would usually direct soldiers. Captain Preston's back here raising his sword up, holding it to the sky as in he's ordering them to fire as well. Additionally, I hope you notice this, that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 British soldiers here. Now, if you remember correctly, I said there was 9 earlier. And I don't think anyone has ever caught this 9th soldier. It's actually a really obscure one. It's something that this isn't true. Paul Revere put this in to make it seem more dastardly of the British. The soldier is soldier is right here. Now, if you can't see it, that's fine. You can't actually see the soldier himself, but you can see his gun. He's shooting out of Butcher's Hall, which there was no Butcher's Hall there. It's a nickname that Paul Revere gave to the customs house because he's arguing that the British are butchers. And this 9th soldier is shooting out the window to try to make it seem that the British are being dastardly again. They're trying to show how bad they are. It's the idea that they have purposely put a sniper in the window because snipers are trained to kill people from long range. And Paul Revere is trying to argue that they put a British soldier up here because they're prepared to shoot at the colonists from every angle that they could. There's a couple other things here. You could argue that the time, it is late at night, so there are some clocks there that point out this is actually happening right in the center of town. So this is like the town hall right there. There's a couple other things happening, but otherwise that's about it. So hopefully this is it for number one. Here's number two. I'll give you a second to write it down. Again, pause it, please. Please pause it, because there's some things I want you to write down first. I want you to kind of be that eye that you can be for yourself, rather than me just telling you these things. All right, so hopefully you pause it. I'm going to start it up now. Things are a little different here, aren't they? This is an unknown author. I've seen it a couple times in a couple textbooks. There is no person that you can really claim as who had actually drawn this picture, but this is just based off stories itself. So first of all, you got to count the soldiers. There's one right there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right here in the corner. This guy, I'd question if he's a soldier. It's hard to tell, but you can tell this is Captain Preston here. I hope you wrote that down. Captain Preston's holding the sword. He's lying on the ground this time, which is much different than him standing behind the other British soldiers. Additionally, you see an interesting difference here between the first and second picture. This man in the front is very, very famous for a very sad reason. His name is Crispus Tux. Crispus was the first person to die at the Boston Massacre. If you notice, Crispus Tux is not actually in the first picture because, yeah, you can guess it. Paul Revere doesn't want to have African Americans in these pictures because he wants to have support from the South. And if he has an African American dying in this picture, the South kind of wonder why he has the freedom to do these things. Additionally, Crispus Tux is holding, as you can see right here, it looks like a club maybe. It's hard to tell. But he's holding something. And not only that, but he's trying to grab at this guy's rifle. Now, clearly he's been shot, so that was unsuccessful. But the fact that he is attacking, along with this guy right here, also attacking, show that this is a little bit more chaotic than it really seems, right? It's no longer simply just the British shooting the Americans. Additionally, there's a lot of dust and chaos in the background. There's all these different colors now, because, again, things aren't just black and white or blue and red. There's also a lot of people standing on the different balconies. You can see that as well, kind of showing that people are curious what's happening outside. Additionally, one thing that they kind of leave out is when soldiers are being told to shoot their guns, people often yell fire. And the colonists were screaming fire at the British, as in they were egging them on, like almost saying like, fire, you won't, fire, fire. They would actually scream fire or be damned. And when people are screaming fire outside in a town made of wood, often people believe that there's actually a fire happening. So people came out of their homes with buckets of water, funny enough. Often they would open their windows and stand on their balconies. It's a cold night. There's snow on the ground, so it's not something that you would expect, but it's possible. That's about it for the second one. There's not too much else different in a little ways, but hopefully you have like 7 or 8 differences as well. Here's the third picture. And here's the last one as well. So again, if you need to take a pause for this, that's fine. There's a couple differences here. I hope you're doing the same things you've done before. You're checking out the colonists, you're checking out the British, you're checking out what Captain Preston's doing. You can tell who Captain Preston is because he has a sword. You're checking out the amount of British, and this one's a little harder, I understand. You're also looking for Crispus Tux, who is right here in the front. I hope you can kind of show his differences and what he's doing as well. This is probably more of an accurate portrayal of him. He is partly Native American, so that's why he has this more of a Native American outfit. This is debatable if he's actually wearing that. There's no record of it, but I think this is an artist's depiction of what he looked like. This is actually from the London Times, so this is the British point of view. And again, hopefully you pause at this point. I'll give you another second because I hope you can stop here. Okay. So, let's start with the British. You can see Captain Preston here. You can tell this is him because he has a sword right there. And something that's changed every time is where is Preston. The first one, he is standing there pointing out what's happening. The second one, he is laying on the ground in front of them. The third one, he is putting his hand up towards his British soldiers. And I hope you wrote that down because it's pretty clear that he's trying to tell the soldiers to do something, and that's to stop firing. If anything, he's in the line of fire. Clearly, he's putting himself between the colonists and the British, but unfortunately for him, it didn't stop the violence. Additionally, with the British, this is a little hard to count, though, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with Preston. Now, this is a little harder though, isn't it? Because you see how they're almost in a little circle rather than in a line like the last two pictures. So you can argue that they're somewhere in this circle, but it kind of adds to the chaos, doesn't it? You can assume they're there, but you can also see like bricks and snowballs and rocks being thrown and sticks being thrown. There's a fire in the background suddenly, because again, they thought there was a fire going on. It was very confusing. There are people still dying. You see a man on the ground, you see a man back here. There's the smoke from the gun that's like going this direction. It's a very, very confusing situation. In reality, this might not be the farthest off from what happened. Not that I'm trying to spoil things from you, but for these three different stories, there's one that definitely stands out as being wrong, this one. But there's another one that is kind of going towards the truth, but in reality, this is probably the most realistic of it. This is your last question as well. I kind of just gave it to you, but that's okay. This is something that you should kind of think about, that it's not simply just the colonists being slaughtered in the streets, but it's a little bit more of, okay, they are both attacking each other. The colonists weren't innocent, though, but the British weren't necessarily innocent as well. Could the British have left? Probably. Should the colonists have left? Probably as well. Here's the cold hard facts, though. One of the British soldiers did fire their musket into the crowd. We don't know who. We never know when it happens, but it happens. The other British soldiers, confused as to what exactly happened, started firing their guns as well, due to the confusion of Captain Preston being on the ground. Finally, the colonists scattered after the single volley of bullets. Captain Preston and his men marched back inside to the customs house, and they were placed under house arrest. They would be taken to jail and charged, as in they were brought to court with murder. This is where it happened as well. Pretty cool picture. Here's like the town hall that we saw in the background multiple times. The customs house is right there. You can kind of see like this semicircle. So it's not necessarily a straight line. It's not back to back like they were. It's almost a semicircle of people, of the British soldiers, as they killed the individuals. Their stars, and the X's are those who were wounded. So you can see it's a smattering, and you can tell by just the X's being from one side of the crowd to the other. This is a very large crowd. This is a couple hundred people in this crowd. So, do I blame the British for being nervous? I don't. But should they have shot people? Well, that's up for debate, of course. In the end, there were 5 dead, 6 wounded. All of them young men that were killed. The 6 wounded, they're varied in age, but for the most part, these were all younger individuals, individuals that were often part of the, I guess, the lower class as well, those who were really hit hardest by these taxes. So if you have those questions done, you are good to go. Please turn those in to me. I will be going online to answer some of your questions on Google Meets sometime. I'll let you know, like on Google Classroom, exactly when I'll be around. Yeah, let me know if you need anything else. All right. Thanks, guys.